I was always the responsible one in my family. At 35 years old, I had built a successful career as a software engineer, paid my bills on time, and somehow became the financial safety net for my aging parents. Every month, I would help with their mortgage, medical bills, and extra expenses without complaint. That was until last Thanksgiving when I accidentally discovered their will while organizing some documents. Everything, and I mean everything, was going to my younger brother Aaron. Before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If my story resonates with you, please hit like and subscribe to support the channel. Trust me, what happens next changed everything. I grew up in a middle-class family in Minnesota, where my parents James and Margaret worked hard, but often struggled to make ends meet. Dad worked at a manufacturing plant, putting in overtime whenever possible, while Mom balanced part-time jobs with taking care of the household. Despite their efforts, money was always tight, especially after my younger brother Aaron was born. From an early age, the differences between Aaron and me were apparent. He was the athletic one, charismatic and quick to smile, easily becoming the center of attention at family gatherings. I was more reserved, preferring books to sports, spending hours taking apart and rebuilding computers in our basement. Aaron was undeniably the golden child, receiving praise for every small achievement, while my academic accomplishments were often met with a simple nod and an expectation for more. I accepted my role in the family dynamic. While Aaron received the newest clothes and latest gaming systems, I understood that my parents saw something special in him that required nurturing. I found validation in my grades and the quiet acknowledgement from teachers who recognized my potential. By the time I graduated high school, I had secured a full scholarship to study computer science at the University of Minnesota. My parents attended the ceremony, of course, but their enthusiasm seemed reserved for the afterparty, where Aaron, then a high school sophomore, impressed everyone with stories about his football season. College was liberating. Away from the shadow of my brother, I thrived academically and socially, making lasting friendships with people who appreciated me for who I was. After graduation, I accepted a job offer in Austin, Texas, working for a growing tech company. The distance from my family provided perspective, and our relationships actually improved with some space between us. My career progression was steady and rewarding. By 30, I had been promoted 3 times, purchased my first condo, and established a comfortable emergency fund. I took pride in my financial independence, especially when I began receiving concerned calls from my mother about my parents' retirement savings. Dad had developed heart problems, requiring expensive treatments not fully covered by Medicare. Mom had to quit her part-time job to care for him, further straining their already limited resources. Their retirement savings, modest to begin with, were rapidly depleting with each medical emergency. When Mom tearfully confessed that they might lose their home, I immediately offered to help. Initially, it was meant to be temporary assistance until they recovered financially. I began by covering their mortgage payment of $1,500 monthly, adding their names to my cell phone plan, and helping with unexpected medical bills. Temporary assistance soon became a regular arrangement. Each month, I would transfer money for their mortgage and utilities, pay medical bills directly, and send extra for groceries and household needs. All told, I was providing around $30,000 in support annually, a significant portion of my income, even with my comfortable salary. Meanwhile, Aaron had moved to Colorado after dropping out of community college, working as a part-time ski instructor and living what he called his best life. His social media was filled with photos of mountain adventures, parties with friends, and expensive equipment that I knew he could not afford on his meager income. When I asked my parents about Aaron's contributions to their situation, they were quick to defend him. According to them, he was still finding himself and could not be expected to provide financial support. In fact, I discovered they were occasionally sending him money when he came up short for rent, despite their own precarious situation. This bothered me, but I reminded myself that I was in a position to help while Aaron was not. I tried to have gentle conversations with my parents about their spending habits, offering to help create a realistic budget, or suggesting they consider downsizing their 4-bedroom house now that it was just the 2 of them. These suggestions were politely but firmly rejected, with my father insisting that they had earned their home and way of life. Despite my growing discomfort with the situation, I continued to support them. After all, they had raised me and even if they had shown preference to Aaron, they were still my parents. I told myself that this was what a good son does, caring for family in times of need. Little did I know how drastically my perspective would change over one Thanksgiving weekend. The discovery happened during what was meant to be a normal holiday visit. I had flown from Austin to Minnesota for Thanksgiving, bringing gifts and planning to enjoy 4 days of home-cooked meals and relaxation. Mom had asked if I could help organize some important documents in their home office, a task she had been putting off due to Dad's health concerns. I agreed, spending Black Friday sorting through medical records, insurance policies, and financial statements, while my parents went to a doctor's appointment. In the bottom drawer of their desk, I found a folder labeled Estate Planning that contained their will updated just 3 months earlier. I probably should not have read it, but curiosity got the better of me. As I scanned the document, my heart began to race. The will left their entire estate to Aaron. The family home valued at approximately $350,000. Their remaining retirement accounts, roughly $175,000. Life insurance policies worth $250,000 each. Family heirlooms, including my grandmother's jewelry that Mom had always said would go to my future wife. My name appeared only once in the document, allocating me a token $5,000. $5,000. After years of supporting them financially, after being the one who answered every emergency call, who rearranged work schedules for medical appointments, who researched treatment options and insurance appeals, I felt physically ill, like someone had punched me in the stomach. With shaking hands, I returned the document to its folder and retreated to the guest room, texting my best friend Jackson about what I had discovered. His immediate response was outrage on my behalf, but I was still processing, still trying to find a rational explanation for what felt like the ultimate betrayal. Sleep eluded me that night as I replayed years of family dynamics in my mind, seeing patterns of favoritism I had previously dismissed or justified. By morning, I had decided to confront my parents, though I would wait until after Thanksgiving dinner to avoid ruining the holiday entirely. Dinner was painfully awkward with me, making minimal conversation while my mind raced. My mother kept asking if I felt ill, clearly sensing the tension but unaware of its cause. After the dishes were cleared, I finally brought up what I had found. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Mom looked away suddenly, very interested in a loose thread on the tablecloth. Dad shifted into defensive mode, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when his decisions were not to be questioned. I asked them to explain their reasoning, trying to keep my voice steady and reasonable. Their justification was that Aaron would need the inheritance more than I would. I had a successful career, financial stability, a solid future ahead of me. Aaron was still finding his way, still needed that safety net that I had never required. When I pointed out that I had been providing significant financial support for years, Mom minimized my contributions, calling it what any good son would do. The implication that my support was an obligation rather than a choice that deserved recognition cut deeply. The conversation escalated when Dad suggested I was being selfish for even questioning their decision. How could I put a price tag on family? Did I only help them expecting something in return? Mom added that she was disappointed in my reaction, that she thought I was above caring about money. Their dismissal of my feelings pushed me to suggest family counseling, a neutral space where we could discuss the inequity of their decision with professional guidance. This suggestion was met with immediate rejection. There was nothing to discuss, according to Dad. Their will was their business, their decision alone. In desperation, I called Aaron, putting him on speakerphone, to include him in the conversation. His reaction was predictably defensive of our parents, accusing me of always being dramatic and making everything about myself. He had no idea about the extent of my financial support, believing our parents were managing fine on their retirement income with occasional help from me. I left the next morning, cutting my visit short despite my mother's tearful protests. The 4-hour drive home gave me plenty of time to process what had happened, memories of childhood favoritism mixing with present-day betrayal, until I felt emotionally exhausted. For the next 2 weeks, I maintained minimal contact with my family, responding to texts with brief messages and avoiding calls. Instead, I sought perspective from people I trusted. I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist, Dr. Collins, who helped me recognize the unhealthy dynamics at play and the importance of setting boundaries. My friends Jackson and Sophia provided unwavering support, validating my feelings when I began to doubt myself. During this period of reflection, I realized how one-sided my relationship with my parents had become. I was the emergency contact, the financial backup, the reliable son they could count on when bills came due. Yet when it came to recognition and legacy, I was an afterthought. The hurt went beyond the money itself. It was what the will represented, a final statement of where I stood in their hearts. After 2 weeks of soul-searching and careful consideration, I made my decision. I spent an evening reviewing my financial commitments to my parents, calculating exactly how much support I had provided over the last 5 years. The total shocked even me, well over $150,000. I thought about my own future needs, the house I wanted to buy, eventually, the family I hoped to have someday, my retirement planning that had been delayed by supporting my parents. I realized that continuing on the current path would mean sacrificing my own financial security for people who had made it clear where their priorities lay. With clarity of purpose, I called my parents on a Sunday evening when I knew they would both be home. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, determined to remain calm and rational despite the emotional nature of the conversation. Mom answered immediately, launching into a story about their neighbor before I could even say hello. I patiently waited for a pause before explaining that I needed to speak with both of them about something important. Dad joined the call, his voice gruff with annoyance at being pulled away from a football game. I explained my decision simply and directly. I would no longer be providing financial support. No more mortgage payments, no more medical bills, no more extras. I had done the math, and I had already contributed what would be equivalent to a significant inheritance. Given their decision regarding their will, I considered my filial obligations financially fulfilled. There was a moment of stunned silence before the explosion. Dad accused me of extortion, of trying to force them to change their will. Mom began to cry, saying she could not believe I would abandon them over money. I remained calm, reiterating that this was not a negotiation, but a decision I had already made. The guilt trips came next. Dad reminded me of the sacrifices they had made for me growing up, the opportunities they had provided. Mom mentioned Dad's health issues, implying that stress from financial worries could worsen his condition. These tactics had worked in the past, but with my eyes now open to the manipulation, I stood firm. The call ended with my father angrily hanging up after declaring that I was no longer the son he had raised. Despite anticipating this reaction, his words stung. I spent that evening with supportive friends trying to focus on the rightness of my decision rather than the pain of the fallout. The week that followed tested my resolve. My phone was flooded with missed calls and voicemails from both parents, ranging from angry tirades to tearful pleas. Aaron sent a series of increasingly hostile text messages, calling me selfish, heartless, and worse. Extended family members began reaching out clearly, having heard a one-sided version of events. I maintained my boundary, responding to messages with brief, factual statements about my decision without engaging in emotional arguments. When the pressure became too intense, I would go hiking at a nearby trail, attend an extra therapy session, or spend time with friends who understood my position. The first real consequence of my decision came exactly 1 month later. My mortgage payment had previously been scheduled for the first of each month, so when the first came and went without my usual transfer, my parents faced the reality of their situation. On the morning of the second, I received a text from my mother. No greeting, no small talk, just 4 words. The mortgage is due. The entitlement in that message, the assumption that I would continue supporting them, despite everything, crystallized my resolve. I simply replied, "I am sure Aaron can help with that." What followed was a flood of messages from both parents. Mom claimed they would lose their home. Dad threatened to never speak to me again if I did not reconsider. I muted their conversations and went about my day feeling a strange mix of guilt and liberation. Through mutual friends, I learned that my parents had indeed been unable to make their mortgage payment. They had called Aaron in a panic, but his contribution had been insufficient. The bank had given them a 2-week grace period before late fees would be applied, but the situation was clearly untenable. The family drama expanded as my parents reached out to extended family for help. My Aunt Susan, Mom's sister, called to talk some sense into me, having only heard my parents' version of events. When I calmly explained my years of financial support and the discovery of the will, her tone changed dramatically. She had had no idea about the extent of my contributions or the complete disinheritance. As their financial situation grew more desperate, my parents' attempts to restore the status quo intensified. Dad called with a vague promise to reconsider the will if I would resume helping with the mortgage. When pressed for specifics, he became evasive, unwilling to commit to any actual changes. Mom left a tearful voicemail about potential foreclosure, trying to place the responsibility for their housing security on my shoulders. I responded with a text reiterating that my decision was not made lightly, and that they had options they were not considering, like downsizing to a more affordable home. After 6 weeks of this back and forth, I offered a final compromise. I would provide limited financial assistance if they revised their will to treat both sons equally, not for the money itself, but as a recognition of my place in the family. They requested time to think about it, which I granted. A week later, I received a call from Dad. They had discussed the situation with Aaron and decided to keep the will as is. Their explanation was convoluted, something about Aaron needing to know they believed in him, about not wanting to change their plans based on coercion. They expected me to come around eventually to recognize my familial duty regardless of inheritance. To their surprise and mine, I received this news with an unexpected sense of relief. The decision was final. The relationship clarified. I wished them well, genuinely hoping they would find a solution to their financial problems, but knowing it would no longer involve my bank account. The months following my decision brought significant changes to my life. The funds previously directed to my parents' bills were now going into my own savings account. Within 6 months, I had accumulated enough for a down payment on a modest house in a neighborhood I had always admired. The process of becoming a homeowner on my own terms felt empowering in ways I had not anticipated. Even more noticeable was the reduction in my anxiety and stress levels. I had not realized how much mental energy had been consumed by managing my parents' finances alongside my own until that burden was lifted. I slept better, performed better at work, and had more emotional bandwidth for my own life and relationships. This newfound space allowed me to meet and connect with Ellie, a graphic designer who understood boundaries in a way that resonated deeply with me. Our relationship developed naturally, without the constant interruptions of family emergencies that had plagued my previous attempts at dating. For 3 months, I maintained minimal contact with my family, responding to occasional texts but avoiding deeper conversations. I heard through mutual connections that my parents had finally accepted their new financial reality. They had sold their house and downsized to an affordable condo, a step I had been suggesting for years. Aaron, faced with the reality that our parents needed actual help, had secured a stable job with benefits, showing a level of responsibility I had not seen from him before. The first holiday after my decision was Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after my discovery of the will. After much consideration, I accepted my parents' invitation, bringing Ellie for moral support. The reunion was awkward, but not hostile, with an undercurrent of unresolved emotions on all sides. After dinner, Mom asked to speak with me privately. In their bedroom, away from others, she acknowledged with tears how unfairly they had treated me. She did not offer to change the will, but her recognition of the inequity felt like a significant step. Dad was less expressive, but showed his own form of acknowledgement by asking my advice about an investment decision. A small gesture that signaled a new respect for my judgment. The long-term effects of my boundary setting proved beneficial for everyone involved. My parents developed better financial habits out of necessity, creating a sustainable budget and eliminating unnecessary expenses. Aaron matured through his new responsibilities, gaining confidence from solving problems rather than being bailed out. Our family interactions, no longer centered around money, gradually became more authentic. About 18 months after my initial discovery, I received a call from their lawyer. My parents had indeed revised their will, creating a more equitable distribution between Aaron and me. While I appreciated the gesture, I realized that I no longer measured my worth in their eyes by what they would leave me after death. The inheritance had become a symbol rather than a goal, and with that realization came a profound sense of freedom. My relationship with Ellie deepened into an engagement, our future plans made with clear-eyed awareness of our financial goals and boundaries. When her parents needed help with medical bills, we discussed it openly and set clear parameters for what we could offer, preventing the kind of resentment that had poisoned my relationship with my own parents. I developed a balanced approach to helping family, recognizing the difference between generous support and enabling dependency. I maintained healthier boundaries with my parents, offering occasional financial gifts for special circumstances, but never returning to the role of their primary provider. The most valuable lesson from this painful experience was learning to value myself beyond my utility to others. For too long, I had measured my worth as a son by what I could provide materially, accepting emotional scraps in return. Breaking that pattern allowed me to see that love should not be conditional or transactional, that healthy relationships require mutual respect and recognition. I do not regret saying no to my parents that day. Sometimes the hardest word to say is exactly what everyone needs to hear. What is something you have said no to that changed everything for the better? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening. And remember that setting healthy boundaries is not just a gift to yourself, but often to everyone involved.